Welcome to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are archived. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. Want to send us a question or comment? Hit us up at dj@artistfirst.com. And now here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Here we are. Thank you very much, Steve. And here we are, Michael and Margaret Lyons. We've been found.
Oh, that's a relief.
And we've been hiding for a week because it's been just awful here on the East Coast. We've had a shot of winter that was definitely 120 proof. But hi there, you.
Hi.
I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And welcome to the Soul of the Everyman show. And the topic this week, our topic this week, I think is a very interesting one. It's something we're all familiar with, which is the concepts of shame and guilt. And, you know, I can hear you out there saying right now, hey, there's no difference between those two. It's just two words for the same thing. Well, how wrong you are. You should be ashamed. But they are used, they are often used interchangeably. And I think that there's no problem, in fact, if, you know, when the words are used interchangeably, but it's the concepts, kind of the underlying concepts of the two, which are important to get to distinguish, you know, make that difference, and then understand, you know, sort of the connotations or the ramifications of both. Mm-hmm. You know, just, you know, to go back to the beginning of this, people often say, well, shame and guilt are the same thing. If, you know, you should be ashamed is a word we say all the time, you know, or I felt guilty, or I felt really bad, I felt really guilty about taking that last cookie, or, you know, whatever the transgression was. And
you have a lot of guilt about cookies, don't you?
You know, I do fixate on the cookies. You know, I you know, this is just going off the rails now. I was doing just fine, and then, geez, well, you know, taking that last that parking spot from that old lady, I didn't do that either. Anyway, so you can feel guilty about doing something wrong. Or you can feel ashamed about doing something wrong, but at the central to both of these things is the idea of right and wrong.
Stringent to it, you can't feel either unless you felt that somehow you've done wrong or been wronged.
Well, that's true, but I mean, in other words, you have to abstract it. You have to say that. You're judging an action, your own action, or your own action is being judged, and it's judged on a kind of right-wrong scale, you know. Mm-hmm. And of course, there are 50 or 5,000 shades of gray, whatever the hell, however many you want to have. So, but we can confidently say that, you know, an action can generally be said to be right if it benefits somebody and doesn't hurt anybody. And it can generally be said to be wrong if it perhaps benefits someone but hurts someone else, you know, in the process of benefiting, or just, you know, it wrong, you know, it injures somebody in some way, and it doesn't have to be physical, of course.
Right.
You didn't say that action is wrong, but the right or wrong of an action is important, but the guilt or shame is a consequence of two things. Mm-hmm. The first thing is that and before we even begin, both guilt and shame are personal concepts. They aren't actions aren't guilty, nor are they ashamed. Right. They can be right or wrong, but they don't have any emotional context associated with them. An action is just an action. The right or wrong of it is just the right or wrong of it. But when you throw the person into there, you have the actor, and the actor acquires a certain consequence from their actions or what their actions, the things that are ascribed to them. So if you say that my actions make me feel good, you could be saying that these are good actions. But in fact, we all know that there are people, not very many of them, who do bad things and feel good. So it's not enough to say that my actions make me feel good. There's also sort of the external component of your actions actually are good, or they aren't harming somebody even though you feel good about them. But so before we go spinning off into the moral things, when we're talking about guilt or shame, we're always talking about a personal consequence.
Right.
So we have an action, we have a judgment whether that action is right or wrong. We then have an actor to which the action is ascribed, and then we have the fun part, the judgment part, and then we get to say you are XYZ, guilty of XYZ, taking that last cookie. I don't know why, kid. Anyway, taking the last cookie, and we know you did it. So you have been identified as the actor of this action, and this action has been deemed to be bad because I wanted that last cookie, and you took it. But now comes sort of the fine distinction, right, Margaret? Which is, what do I, the one who has done the action and has been caught, or in other words, you have to have the action attributed to you. You can't. Usually, this doesn't happen. These consequences don't happen in broad unless there is another person who is involved in judging you. But let's not go too far in that direction. So, you, the actor, have been ascribed to the action, and then you have a feeling that arises. It can be great. I'm very happy about all this, but in general, it can be a feeling of guilt, or a feeling of shame, or both. There's the neither case. We're not going to go there. The difference, the seminal difference, and we put this boss graphic up on the website, which you should all go to artistfirst.com/lions.html and look at that boss graphic. But that boss graphic basically distinguishes the two in this way. Shame is an internal feeling, a judgment that you pass upon yourself. And guilt is an external feeling or external consequence of a judgment that has been passed upon you. Or you can also say, I feel guilty, so you can say, but it has the connotation that you are disassociating internally the action from who you are, versus shame, which is that you are conflating the action or the judgment with who you are. So shame is a personal emotion, or it's not an emotion, but a personal judgment, a judgment about identity.
Right.
I am no longer me in the action. I am the action. The action was bad. I am bad. Versus guilt is there's me in the action. I did a bad thing. We all know that you wanted that cookie and I took it. And I'm sorry. And I promise I won't do it again. Those are the three things of guilt. You have to say, I know I did wrong. So you say, I give up, hey man, I took the cookie. It was just lying there. And you have to say, I'm sorry, I have remorse. And then you would also say, I will go forth and sin no more. I will try to do better next time. I'll try to make sure that you don't notice I took the cookie. That kind of thing. But shame is much stickier, and it's much more evil in many ways as far as what it does to people, because shame it forces you to put yourself in a category of being bad, not of doing bad, doing something wrong. You are being bad. You are judging yourself to be bad. You're internalizing and saying, I'm bad. I'll never be any better. I'm always going to be bad, and I should be removed from society. I should be isolated from society.
I should be punished for it.
I should be punished for it.
Is usually the response when you identify with.
I deserve.
Yes. Yes. If you've judged yourself, you are basically saying, I deserve this punishment.
Right. I'm somehow less than everyone else. Everyone is better than me.
And that's where you've got to become very aware when that raises its head, because it's so easy to roll guilt and shame together. You know, that the action that you did may have been bad, but to tell this person you are bad because you've done this action, that is basically giving you that identity of something that is not good. You know, there's no good in you. That's the accusation. And it's wrong, because the action is different from who you are. And that's why it needs to be put in a very clear light so that you can distinguish between the two. Because if you continually are judging yourself as bad for whatever incident it may be, you are in your own personal hell at that point. There is no joy in your life, no matter if everything is going your way and, you know, making a lot of money, you're driving what you always thought you wanted to drive, you know, your relationships are pretty good, but you will always come back to, I'm not good.
Not worthy.
And that is something that is so painful, yet you push it underneath so you don't see it anymore. It's like pushing it under the table so you can't see it on top, where everything is revealed. You know, and so it continually gets pushed down. And sometimes this will motivate your actions in ways that you didn't understand why you did that.
That's a very good point, is shame, and this is something that comes out in studies of this from the point of view of behavioral studies. Shame is always something that people try to hide.
Yep.
You know, in other words, you immediately have a bifurcation of self. You have the face you show on the outside, and then you have this ball of shame, which is to say that I know that this is just a facade, and that I'm really not worthy of anything. I am judged myself to be bad, evil, wrong. You know, I am bad. Is that consequence of internalizing this judgment?
Right. And when that happens, it's a constant voice in your head that is basically telling you, you know, you are less than. There's that judgment that you were doing to yourself constantly. And I do remember that we were taught that, you know, well, you're supposed to judge yourself. Nobody else is going to judge you. And that is wrong as well, because that did not separate your identity from the action.
Right. It also means that, you know, that idea of, in essence, damning yourself, of judging yourself to be irretrievably bad, is sort of the core of the separation of self from that which can forgive you, whether you can be forgiven by God, or you can be forgiven by others. You've judged yourself to be unforgivable,
right,
or to be unlovable, to be less than others, less than human, in that you are no longer worthy of the same considerations you would give somebody else. Oh, it was just a mistake. We'll try to do better. We'll apologize. We'll move on. No, you are bad, and therefore you're irretrievably bad.
And the sad part about it is that voice, it plays out in all forms. It just everything small to big. I mean, usually we think of shame as something huge, but that feeling is used as a whip continually on ourselves because we're told we're supposed to judge ourselves. And if you don't mind, I'd like to just read this little, like a little poem by Holly Holden, but it is so concise to this. All right. Today, I asked my body what she needed, which is a big deal, considering my journey of not really asking that much, which is basically what a lot of women do. I thought she might need more water, or protein, or greens, or yoga, or supplements, or movement. But as I stood in the shower reflecting on her stretch marks, a roundness where I would like flatness, or softness where I would like firmness, all those conditioned wishes that form a bundle of never quite rightness. She whispered very gently, "Could you just love me like this?" And that voice is something that women have, where they're constantly, it's cultured, mind you. You're supposed to look a certain way to be part of the rightness.
To be right, to be not shamed.
Right, because, and that's exactly it. It's that feeling of shaming that you are actually doing to yourself.
Well, actually, we touched on an interesting topic there because cultural shaming can take all these different forms. Women can be told that they have to live up to an unrealistic ideal, and then shamed or in essence made to feel that they are bad if they can't. It's a impossible goal,
right?
But then you're told that because you can't reach the impossible goal, you are bad. So this is the worst type of catch-22. It gives you a handle, a control over this person, because all what do they have to do? They have to agree that they're bad, and once they've internalized it, you got them.
Right.
Then you can yank them around like an animal with a bit in its mouth. Yeah. You can guide them any way you want with a ring in its nose. You can just tell them you got to go here, you got to go there, because you'll never be good unless. So.
And what I want to bring up is the point that this feeling, this judgment, is the foundation and root of bullying. Because everybody talks about, fight the bully, that whole structure is of not quite rightness is used by bullies to be able to control and take from you. Yes.
And right there is the very interesting point about bullying is that you have to almost agree to be it. You have to at some level you are complicit by saying I internalize that I am bad. I agree that the impossible goal must be attained, and that I can't attain it makes me bad, and therefore you can control me. Now you can bully me around. And then there's sort of the aspect that's the cultural aspect of shaming, and there's many different forms. There's the bullying aspect of shaming, and then there's sort of the societal the broader culture. You had mentioned before we got on the air that there's a broad culture of shaming in many Asian cultures. Where you're all
older cultures Shame is a big thing. It is foundational to controlling the society.
Yeah.
And in the United States, they've basically wanted to eradicate shame, which is kind of interesting because you can't do that from the outside. Shame is an internal that's got to be dealt with, not an external.
Right.
And the cultures, and just the Asian culture, you must always put the family first, and it has to do with face. Face has to do with maintaining face of your family has a lot to do with shame. You must not shame the family in any way, shape, or form. And that not shaming is everything from the impossible goal that's being set for you, because it's supposed to bring honor to your family.
Right.
To not really even having an identity that's your own.
Right.
Okay. In Asia, you do not have an identity outside of your family. In the United States, in the in the Western cultures, this idea of the individual is very different than in Eastern culture. Your family is everything. Everything. So you must sacrifice for your family, even if you don't like it.
And you have these impossible goals, which are used to control. So before we go too far down those, because those are wonderful examples of how shame and what we've defined it as is internalizing a feeling of guilt, so that you become intrinsically less. When you are ashamed, there is somebody who is better than you. And maybe if it's really bad, everybody is better than you, is more worthy than you are. Therefore, those people, these undefined masses of perfect people, can tell you what to do, because you are less. You're controlled. So shame is a very toxic feeling. It is used and it's inculcated into youth and into young people as you mentioned, as a whip, whether it's bullying on an individual basis or cultural shaming. We say in the West, everyone's no one has any shame, but that's completely false. It's just a different type of shame.
It's true. Because the concept of shame is actually human.
Oh yeah, I mean we can't get away from we are who we are. But Madison Avenue shames people all the time. Fat shaming. You're not driving the right car. You're not. And yeah, if you have the you have to be complicit. You have to agree at some level that you are bad. But once they get inside and get you there, it takes you to a very dark place. And in older societies, and it's not just the East, it's more traditional cultural societies in the West as well. They had, in Ireland, you had the car line. Well, the legend of the car line was that on, I think it was Beltane or one of those holidays, you would find one person who would be covered in ash and driven out of the community for supposedly 3 days to take away all the badness of the community. They were
scapegoat.
They were the scapegoat. They were publicly shamed and made as sort of a public sacrifice to the evils of all the others. But being the car line, being the one who was shamed was a terrible
fate.
It became, like you said, like a scapegoat. You were the sacrifice so that everybody else could feel better about themselves. And we are doing that here today now, and it's done, in the Asian societies. The family, this nebulous entity, has to have you sacrifice everything so that it can feel better. This kind of well, if you don't do everything I ask you to do, then you're bringing shame upon the family, and you are bad. So that's where these words in the West have been kind of put together and say, oh, I'm ashamed, I'm guilty, whatever. Guilt is a whole different thing. We haven't talked much about guilt, but guilt is a whole different thing because guilt intrinsically has within itself a positive thing. You've done something bad. Somebody has said, hey, you've done that bad thing, haven't you? And you say, oh, yeah, I did that bad thing. And almost the very next word out of your mouth is, I'm sorry. Because you're like, well, I admit I did a bad thing, but I'm immediately at the point of saying, well, how can I make it better? I screwed up. I did this. I did that. I did the other thing. It's very positive. You're not trying to segregate. You're not trying to be segregated away from all of humanity and put under control. You're just saying, well, we all do bad things. It's my turn to do the bad thing. I admit it. And hey, man, I did the bad thing. How can I fix it? How can I make it better? There are many bad things which are impossible to make better. Murdering people, bad, very hard to make better. But it also always gives guilt. The admission of guilt always gives the other, the one who was wronged, the opportunity to forgive you, to be forgiven. You're when you say how can I make it up to you, you're really saying, I apologize. Can you forgive me?
Yeah, and that is a real big difference between shame and guilt. Because shame, there is no forgiveness. And
there's never any solicitation for it. They don't want you to be forgiven.
That's right. They will basically, if you are shamed, there is no forgiveness. There is nothing that you can do to make it up. Therefore, the immediate punishment is nigh near to death.
Right, and once you have accepted shame, you are under control, and you no longer you will never be forgiven. That's the core tenet of shame, is that you are bad, and now you are never to be forgiven. So the toxic shame is I'll hold on to this grudge, this offense forever. That's the other side of it. Is the shame means that you look at that person and you remember that offense they did, and you know that they're guilty forever, and they're always going to be less than you, and they're always have to be ashamed. Guilt, it comes very positively towards forgiveness, towards restitution, and towards the promise that I will try not to do it again. So guilt is us sinning, admitting our sin, begging forgiveness, being forgiven. It's almost the two words are so closely related, but they're almost diametric opposites. The only relationship the only thing that ties them together is that there was a wrong action.
Right.
But the consequences of one are damnation, in essence, and the other one are, please forgive me, and let me come back into the fold. Let me grow and become better, even after doing something bad.
Right. No, this is true. This is true. And for a society to choose something other than using shame to control its people. It brings to mind ho'oponopono that the Hawaiians do, where it's, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, and I think the fourth is I'll do better. But I have to look that up. I'm not sure.
Well, we're going to take a break, go back to the studio. We're very sorry that we have to do this. We're going to take a break, go back to the studio, and we're going to look up ho'oponopono.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lynes is book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
The Timeless Esoterica radio program with Dr. Bruce is broadcast on the fourth Monday of every month at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern on ArtistFirst.com. We explore topics including the paranormal, alien life, mysteries, conspiracies, hidden history, oddities, and much more. Each show will feature a special guest with exciting and thought-provoking discussion. Always keep an open mind, an open heart, live forever, and remember Dr. Bruce believes in you.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lynes, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is no need to feel sorry about listening to the soul of the Everyman. In fact, you'd probably feel guilty if you didn't. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lynes.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Yes, you should be ashamed if you're not listening right now. If you're listening, how can you hear this if you're not listening? We are back, and welcome to the second half of the Soul of the Everyman show. And we are talking tonight about the difference between shame versus guilt. And there's this boss graphic up on the website you should definitely go look at. But on our way out to the break, we were looking up Ho'oponopono, whatever that thing is. So Margaret has it, I'm pretty sure. Go ahead, go.
Oh no.
See how easy she said that?
It's a Hawaiian prayer or a Hawaiian way of settling disagreements. And 4 phrases. I am sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you.
And this is said by the person who's begging forgiveness.
Well, said by both.
Said by both, okay.
Because they usually, whenever there is a problem or a conflict, they come to an elder who basically moderates this And these are the 4 phrases that each one says to each other.
Okay. Well, and notice, and this was in last half hour, but notice that in that case, what we're doing is very similar to, the guilt side. It's very positive. Of the two feelings, guilt versus shame, guilt is a much more positive emotion. And notice that that's a shared thing. Both injured parties, or both parties who are involved in this dispute, or this argument, are in essence asking each other for forgiveness or for understanding, and
they both say that they're sorry for the conflict.
Exactly.
Okay. Please forgive me. Thank you, which means that I receive that forgiveness, and I love you.
So the end of it is a rejoining.
Right.
And that's very typical. Again, we started this whole thing with saying, well, what relates these two things, these two feelings, shame and guilt, is that there is an action, and the action is judged to be wrong. You don't get guilt or shame from actions that are judged to be right. That's a whole other discussion. But so the action is judged to be wrong, and then there's the consequence, and the consequence of this act, this way of resolving is very similar to the sort of the guilt side. Is that you the actor admit that you did something wrong.
Well, it's the acknowledgement that the two of you are in disharmony with each other.
In this wonderful ceremony, the actor and the person who was injured and the person who did the injury are both saying the same things, because it's important that community is preserved. We all that's a wonderful reflection of the fact, again, on the guilt side, that we all are sinners in the sight of God. We all do bad things. Everybody does bad things. And we all have the need to say, I'm sorry once in a while, and get forgiveness.
We understand we are not perfect. And the best thing that we can aim for is harmony between each person. So when you come to a point of disharmony, your first response is, I am sorry. And you're sorry because it's a conflict, not because you were wrong or right necessarily, but you are sorry, first of all, that there's a disharmonious point here.
Right.
And our humanity has brought us to that. It's acknowledging your humanity at that point.
And your imperfection.
Please forgive me. I'm not perfect.
Right.
Thank you.
Receive
that forgiveness. Because you both say, well, we're not perfect.
Right.
And I love you.
So it's both a restitution and a reacceptance into the community. We're all one. We're all one. And I think central to that, central to both things, to the guilt and to that sort of a ceremony, is the realization that neither party, neither the injured nor the injurer, are perfect. And essential to the shame part of that is that perfection is demanded. Something is demanded which is impossible to produce, and you are designated, you, the person who cannot produce the perfect thing or the impossible thing, that you are bad, irredeemably bad, because you can never reach an unattainable goal.
Right. Exactly. This is not perfection. This is not heaven. This is what it means to be human.
But to demand perfection and then to subjugate others, call them less and bad and wrong because they can't be perfect, is to both put yourself in the position of the perfect judge, the one who, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Well, when you're trying to shame others, you are standing there casting stones left and right as though you never sinned and that you are the perfect one.
Mm-hmm.
So the person who shames, the person who distributes shame or tries to shame others, is also hiding. They're trying to assume the mantle of perfection, or of the gateway to perfection. What I say must be followed in order to be perfect. So I'm God's, avatar, who can say whether you are perfect or not.
Right. You are, that person basically denies his own humanity.
Yes.
Which is an interesting thing. And the only way they feel good is if they have something over someone else.
Mm-hmm.
That is the only way that they have any kind of power. It's, again, a third chakra thing, where someone has power over and is subjugating the one that is under to the point of pain and destruction. Usually, if it's shame, it's pain and destruction. And the interesting part about that is that the person that is being judged as under is accepting the fact that they are less than. And that's because you do not have the fullness of understanding of who you are.
Right.
You're accepting something from someone else or something else that says you are less than. It's like, well, no, I'm not.
Right.
I am not. So having a society do that is a hard thing to break, truth be told, because unless your concept of who you are is very strong, and you are in an environment which basically is telling you you are less than, you are not coming up to the standard we've put to you.
Exactly.
So you should be ashamed of yourself for not meeting this ridiculous standard that you're supposed to do. In that effect, in that kind of interchange, there's a person that is dominant in taking power from the person who they are accusing of being less than. You're taking life force from that person. You don't deserve to live. Let me take your life.
Right. Subjugating.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always reminded, it's a wonderful poetic story, but of the garden, of the Garden of Eden, because in essence, what's the seminal phrase is, when both Adam and Eve realize that they're naked and they are ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's a wonderful phrase because in that seminal moment, they have separated themselves from who they were because they didn't know who they were. They have separated themselves from communion with their Creator, and in essence judged the creation, which they are, to be bad.
Right.
In other words, they took something which, and this is, again, this is biblical, but it's human too, okay? The human part of creation was that creation was good, intrinsically good. It was only when creation itself decided that it would judge itself to be bad,
right,
and take on the mantle of shame. If people are going to get tied up in this, but I'll say it anyway. The actual essence of original sin is shame. People think of it as disobedience, but it's more than that. It's disobedience, which was wrong, but then judging that one could not be forgiven. Original sin and shame are irredeemable. And that's the wonderful thing about them. It's why they become, in essence, the way that people are controlled, is that once you have judged yourself to be irredeemable, stained from birth without any action on your own part, because that's the whole idea of an original sin, is that you haven't done a darn thing and you're still bad. Woohoo! That is, the essence of what shame is. Shame is, I'm bad and there's no way out. I'm bad because I've judged myself to be bad. I am bad. So that wonderful story, that wonderful poem, the Creator creates everything, and everything is good by definition. And then the things which were created good have sentience, knowledge, and through knowledge they say, I am bad. And those words, I was ashamed, are really the foundation, if you ask me, of original sin. I realized I was naked. I realized that I was no longer able to. I had internalized my guilt, internalized this badness, and judged myself wrong. I am bad. I am ashamed. Bam.
Right. That is the fall.
That's the fall. That's the fall.
It's the fall of consciousness.
Exactly.
Instead of focusing on good. And when you are in shame, the concept of going through that ritual of Ho'oponopono.
Here we go again. I can't say it. Go.
No, but I mean going through. I always wondered why didn't Adam and Eve do something like that? Turn to God and say, I'm sorry.
Exactly.
Please forgive me.
Can I stay in the garden? And God would have said, sure. Yeah.
So what prevented that? And it had to do with self-judgment.
Exactly. The original sin is, let's say, again with this poem, but the poetic is that man judged himself to be evil.
Right.
That men and women judged themselves to be evil. And in judging themselves to be evil, their words, their own actions, their own judgment was the stain.
Mm-hmm.
It's often written that God says you will be cast out of the garden. Well, they cast themselves, in essence, out of this metaphysical garden by saying, I am wrong, I am ashamed, I am bad. When the converse of that, the wonderful converse of that, there's two things, of course. The fact that we can ask forgiveness, and we have this vehicle for forgiveness now. But the wonderful converse of that is before we judged ourselves to be bad, we were perfect. We just didn't know it.
Right.
It was in accepting shame. In essence, what was brought into the garden was shame, and shame drove us out of the garden. It's something which we still carry forward as human beings throughout. We use shame as that whip, as that control, as that third chakra power thing, because it's so powerful.
But there is a way out of it. There is a way out of it. You must move from that power issue to the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And truth be told, that requires a sacrifice of self completely.
Yep.
And sacrificing self basically means that you are no longer who you think you are, and you're not judging you.
Right. Right.
That shame was taken on the cross so that we may take a move forward into receiving our identity. It's not that you are the shame any longer.
Right. And if we go off into that whole arc of what's called salvation history, that's what that is about. It's moving from the I am bad to the I can do bad things, but I can be forgiven.
Right. And it's different. your identity, your I am,
Mm-hmm.
is not what you are doing. That distinction, okay? The sin of the garden is that they identified with the action as opposed to who they truly are, which is basically a rejection of God at that point.
People, man, separated themselves from the garden, from perfection, by judging themselves and being ashamed of themselves. It's that's how powerful that and the difference between the two is once you judge yourself to be irredeemable, you are lost.
Mm-hmm.
You can't.
And the truth is, I think of when I was doing those presentations with people who were in rehab,
addiction, yeah,
the addiction centers. One story stood out in my mind where the gentleman basically had judged himself so completely as bad. And he was bad because he felt that he had gone against society. You know, suddenly he was, it was a long story. But anyway, he had discovered that he was gay, but he had been engaged. And the girl loved him. But he broke off with her, broke her heart, and broke the heart of both families. And he judged himself so completely as bad that it didn't matter what was going on. He couldn't forgive himself for it.
Right.
He wound up going into addiction to get away from the pain.
Exactly.
You know, and it was both alcohol and narcotics. And his turnaround point, because they all say that you've got to hit the rock bottom before you'll turn around. But his turnaround point, he said, was when he was in his jail cell on the floor, face down. And this has been, you know, years of going through this addiction and doing things that he's continually despising himself for. And he just said, no, enough. This is not who I am. And this is when he said, literally, he felt Jesus come to him and put a hand on his back as he's lying on the cell floor. And he said he couldn't move, but it felt like fire going through his body. And that's when he found his soul again.
You have to stop punishing yourself and stop judging yourself. It's what makes it such a wonderful, horrible, evil trap, is that you turn away, and in turning away, you deny your own self. You judge yourself to be bad, and it becomes self-destructive. Shame leads towards destruction. It leads towards ultimately to death.
Right. It leads towards death. And it's understanding that until you hit that point in you, you know, and I remember him saying that he had gone through rehab a few times, but until he had hit that point where he had to reject these actions, this shame that he had accepted, until he rejected it and found that he is more than what these actions were.
Right.
He was trapped in this cage of shame and frankly being eaten alive by all those demons.
Exactly. The most horrible thing about shame is that it's a cage which is built from your own self that you can't get out of, because you've put all your energy, all of your power into telling yourself that you're bad.
Right.
And you you have to do what he did, is you have to realize you're more than that. That all your judgment, and it can be the mental judgment, the chakra, the third power chakra, all that judgment is not you. There is more to you.
Because
that's what gets you out. If anything gets you out.
Well, you have to hit that point. You have the key. You have got to take that step.
It's the most horrible trap ever, because you're sitting there with the key in your hand, and you say, I can't use it because I'm not worthy. You're staring at the key that opens the door. Or the door may not even be locked. The door is just closed. You could push it open at any time, but you say, I'm not worthy. You stop yourself. Shame is so toxic. It's so, it really is the original sin in that regard, because the toxicity is to name oneself evil and less, and to accept it.
I go back to that tendency that we all have as human, as to when we're going into relationship, you are looking for something that reflects back to you, whether it's, your career, your outside world, your friends, your marriage. You're looking for something that is going to reflect back to you who you are. If you have received shame as your reflection, the outside world cannot help you, because it doesn't matter what that appears to be. All you see is the reflection of shame, which becomes your cage.
Yeah.
Everywhere you turn, it's just shame. So until that is recognized, because the tendency, once you recognize shame, is to run. You don't want to see shame. So you keep hiding from your own shame.
Oh, yeah. And that's the most wonderful thing.
Wonderful? Why wonderful?
Well, the most wondrous, amazing, crazy thing about it is that people will hide and pretend that they don't have this toxicity, and to the point of rather destroying themselves than admit that they're in shame. Do you know what I mean? It's
a hideous thing. I don't think it's wonderful.
It's a hideous thing that like you were saying, it takes over all of your energy, all of your heart, all of your power, and uses it against yourself.
Well, I want to know why you're saying wonderful. What is the description?
No. The word I'm trying to say is not wonderful. That it's a wonderful thing. It's so amazingly powerful that it takes over a whole person, and that they can't get out of it, because it's like you against you. It turns, like you were saying, it's a reflection that turns everything back. It both masks itself and keeps every other thing that could rescue you away. The only way out is you have to get yourself out. But people go all the way to death and destruction and hideous addiction because they can't find that way out. They can't allow themselves out. You know what I mean?
Well, I do understand that.
Don't get stuck in the word. I'm just saying it's so.
Okay, should I just disregard that word?
It's such an amazingly powerful. It's an amazingly evil thing. Okay?
Yes.
That's all I'm trying to say.
It is ridiculously evil.
Okay. And that's what I mean. It's the it's beyond belief.
Well, on that note.
And on that unbelievable note, we are very sorry to say
that we have reached the end of our hour.
Yeah, we've reached the end of our hour, and I hope, folks, that you take something away from this. This has been The Soul of the Everyman, and embrace your guilt and eschew shame. It's terrible. I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret. Thank you for listening.